The Scandinavian countries have very high levels of taxes, and so I attended a 2-day conference on new taxes and legal ways to avoid them. The conference was held in a nice conference hotel known for its rumored raucous nightlife. The first day was interesting and rewarding. After the usual conference dinner, the three of us took seats at a small round table in the hotel's crowded bar. We soon discovered that the three of us, Dennis, Jens, and I, had much the same interests in taxation and almost identical experiences with women. While most of the people in the bar probably have a wife or husband at home, many of the guests acted like desperate loners during the raucous hunt for a partner for the night that was going on around us. Even all three of us got a few offers, and much to my surprise, both of my friends turned down even the prettiest ladies with a polite "no thanks," and were equally surprised to hear the same behavior from me. After drinking and chatting, we found out that all three of us had been cheated on by their wives, and it was only minor accidents that made us find out. We decided to tell our stories, and I started with mine. The short version is this. During a bachelorette party at a hotel bar, my wife accepted a toy boy's invitation to go to the hotel room with him. Before she left the bar with him, her co-worker at work gave her a 3-pack of condoms. She and the boy toy used one of them, and she didn't hesitate to throw the other 2 away. My wife can't take pills because they make her very sick, so we used condoms during our lovemaking. I bought them in packs of 12 and kept them in the drawer of my bedside table. She put her 2 leftovers in my drawer among the others, but didn't think her 2 packs were different from the others. I noted this so that the next time they have a date, I can pounce on them and clear the air. I was fairly compensated and did not divorce my wife. She knew the rumors about the hotel and begged me not to do anything stupid, which I promised her I would. I always keep my promises. Dennis's story. Although our sex life dwindled in both quality and quantity, I never suspected her of cheating. She worked part-time, 70%, in a dentist's waiting room, and so she occasionally had extra afternoons. On some of those extra afternoons, she traveled to visit her retired parents, who live in a village about 60 kilometers from the town where we lived. We only had one car, a Toyota Avensis, which she drove during the day to work, shopping, and home. Since my work is much closer to our home than hers, I rode my bicycle to work when the weather was good. I used the car the evening before her trip to her parents' house and promised her I would put gas in the tank, but I forgot. In the evening, she called me and told me that she had left very late, and so she stayed the night at her parents' house. When she came back early in the morning, she was mad as a bee and grumbled for a long time about the forgotten gasoline. It was raining heavily in the morning, so I took the car, promising to come home later and drive her to work. I got in the car and noticed a crumpled piece of paper on the floor, picked it up, and was about to put it in the small wastebasket we had under the driver's seat when I happened to see the text. It was a receipt from a gas station, dated the same morning, and the time was 06:10, about 40 minutes before she got home. But, much to my surprise, the receipt was from a motel gas station about 40 kilometers in the opposite direction from her parents' home. No doubt she spent the night at the motel. Hardly not alone, for this motel was the only one in the area and thus preferred much better for cheating than hotels. 2 weeks later, she was going to visit her parents again, and told me that this time, too, she intended to arrive home in the morning rather than drive in the evening. This time, I took all the necessary steps to catch her. I had a battery-powered voice recorder in the car, and I set the odometer to 0 in case she drove straight to the motel. One of my co-workers and his wife came to my house around 9 p.m. She stayed to babysit, and he and I headed to the motel. As I expected, there was a metallic blue Toyota Avensis in the parking lot, and it was my car. I unlocked it with my spare keys, checked the odometer, noted that my parents even had it. Before heading home in my Toyota, I noted the license plates of those very interesting cars in the parking lot. Back home, I drove the car into the garage. My coworker at work arrived a little earlier than I did, and he and his wife drove home. I listened to the stereo. She was on her cell phone telling some Tommy how much she loved him, and that she would have to stay a little longer because this time she had to see her parents first, but she would be at the motel no later than 7. The next sound on the tape was her answering the phone and telling him that she was only 10 minutes from the motel and how much she wanted to have him. She was sorry that this time would be the last time they would be able to see each other. She promised him an unforgettable night, so that he would always remember her with great pleasure and got back to her place sooner than she expected. The next day, I took the next day off work. She called me early in the morning to tell me that our car had been stolen and almost panicked when I told her I would take the company car and drive over to her parents' house to catch it and straighten things out with the police and insurance company. She yelled that a neighbor had already promised to give her a ride home. I agreed, and around 8 she arrived in a black BMW 500 that was parked next to our Toyota in the motel parking lot. She jumped out of the car without turning her nose up at the driver. Back at the house, she began to tell me how shocked she was when she walked out of her parents' house. Lucky for her, their neighbor's son drove by and she stopped him. He promised to take her home and she didn't want to worry her old parents and didn't tell them anything. She called the police on the way home, and when she got the paperwork from the police, she had to contact the insurance company. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her story. Now I sprang into action. I gave her my paper with the license plate numbers of all the cars that were in the motel parking lot at 9:30 in the evening. I asked her if she could recognize any of them. She turned pale when she found our Toyota among them and said that the car thief must have come from her house to the motel. Then I gave her the license plate number of the BMW she had come home in. She found even it on the list, but couldn't explain why even her so-called neighbor had spent the night at the motel. She just called it a coincidence. When I asked her for the keys to our Toyota, she gave them to me. Then I told her that one of my colleagues saw my Toyota at the motel, and since he knew you were in the opposite direction, he called me and I realized it must have been stolen. So I just drove there and took it home. But even after a very thorough inspection, there was no sign of damage, so the car must have been started with a key. She couldn't explain anything until she listened to the tape recorder. Then she confessed everything and begged me to forgive her, but I filed for divorce, and now I've met a beautiful girl and just married her. Even Tommy's wife left him shortly after it was reported. I don't know anything about this Tommy, but my ex-wife is still single. Thomas told us that this was the reason he did not participate in the night hunt. If his ex had used the wastebasket, they would still be married. Jens's story. Even I caught my cheating wife in her minor mistake. We had been married for 4 years, agreed that it was time to have a baby, and decided to spend a romantic week at an expensive hotel on the coast and start making a baby as soon as we got there on Friday night. However, on Wednesday, during a coffee break at my work, a coworker had a new idea for a trip, and I decided to call her right away to talk about it. I picked up my cell phone and pressed the button for her number. A ringing sounded on the other end. Someone picked up, and a male voice in the background whispered, "Hang up." There was a strange sound in the receiver that sounded very familiar to me. When I checked the last ring and the number appeared on the display, I noticed that I had pressed the wrong button and called home instead of her work. I now knew that the strange sound was coming from the phone on the bedroom nightstand in my empty house. Someone, obviously a burglar, had picked up the phone by mistake, and his coworker had asked him to put it down, which he did. The 3 coworkers who were with me for the coffee break followed me, and we headed off in the direction of my house. We ignored the speed limit and made it home in a matter of minutes. There was a black Saab 9, 5 parked in my driveway. We parked in such a way that we blocked his driveway. I then snuck into the garage where my golf bag was stored, from which I took a club to each of us. There was no visible damage to the front door, and it was locked. Before I opened the door with my key, we agreed to make a quick run to the bedroom, where the crooks were probably still trying to crack the safe hidden in the closet. I opened the door with clubs at the ready, and, shouting as loudly as possible, we rushed into the bedroom. As expected, we found 2 people there. But not crooks, just my wife and her boss, both naked, obviously interrupted during sex. With 3 of my coworkers as witnesses, there was only one thing left to do: finalize the divorce as soon as possible. I never inquired how long their affair lasted. Even her boss's wife filed for divorce, and my ex-wife got pregnant. In a desperate attempt to get me back as the baby's father, she refused to have an abortion. But a 99.9% DNA test confirmed that her boss was the father of the baby, and they even lived together for a few months. Having an affair with someone is one thing, but living together with the same person is not necessarily the path to happiness. If she had chosen to sleep with her boss in her bed rather than mine, she wouldn't have gotten to that point. She would have picked up the phone for a few seconds, and we would have left for our romantic weekend. I believed I was the lucky father of our child and probably never learned the truth that her boss was the real father. Jens told us that today he's glad for his ex-wife's mistake because he lives together and has a child with the real dream girl, so he doesn't want to take part in the hunt for a bed partner. 3 good guys, 3 cheating wives who made almost meaningless little mistakes that made their unsuspecting husbands curious about the details. In my case, it was her first time, but Dennis and Jens's wives have had long-term affairs, which explains the different outcomes for them. The main question that we 3 guys could never find a suitable answer to during the evening was, why do cheating wives always get the good guys, and why are there almost no true rumors about asshole cuckolds?